my gosh. I am so honored to be sitting down with you today. Yay!
Glad we can make it work.
I'm so honored. Why did you agree to do it with me?
I don't know. That was kind of dumb of me, wasn't it?
Well,
no,
yeah, I'm just
it's
like,
awesome.
why?
Look, it was because I come here a lot to New York, and I'm like, it's great. It's like a good public interest thing. It'd be awesome. Let's do this. It'd be fun.
Okay.
So,
well, I really appreciate it.
So don't screw it up, you know?
I know. I feel very pressured. Okay. You guys, we are sitting down with former U.S. Representative Adam Kinzinger from Illinois. Thank you for your service in our military and in the government and your continued service to helping keep our democracy intact because it's a scary time.
It's a fight, yeah.
It is a fight.
It's crazy. And so, yeah, we all have to do it. I mean, this is like, I keep telling people, I'm like, we need to all take that, burden off our shoulder that we carry ourselves. Like, I got to send out one more tweet or I have to do, no, it's not just you. It's all of us. But that's the thing is, it is all of us. So we have to stay engaged. And by the way, the people that don't love democracy, they get energized by this. This is they love chaos. We hate chaos. So we're at a disadvantage. So we got to take some time for ourselves and do fun things.
Yeah. Okay, so before we start with what I really want to talk about today, which is the documentary, I just wanted to start with something that I thought was interesting because when I was going to sit down with you, I expressed so much excitement to my friends and my family about getting to chat all the things. And every single person expressed concern and was like, don't get too political. It's very divided right now. It's very divisive. There's a lot of vitriol happening. And obviously, it's like little old me, who cares about me? But I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And it says a lot about where we are as our country, that people are scared to speak out. What do you think about that?
That is frightening. It's interesting because when I got into politics, I was 6 years old when I started to like it. I mean,
I know.
It's crazy.
We'll get to that because I love that story.
It's crazy. But then when I kind of grew up and got older and started to really realize politics is more than yard signs and, I love the debates. In college and high school, you're talking to people, you have differences, and we'd have fun kind of hashing it out. That used to be a good time. And it's turned into life and death with people. It's you can't, it's almost impossible to find somebody having a good political debate where they're on different sides. And the problem is that's the lifeblood of government and democracy. Because all democracy is you're taking basically conflict and you're distilling it down into words with a game plan, right? You have rules you play by. That's what democracy is. When that blows up, I mean, life's going to be tough then.
Yeah, I agree, which is, okay, that is a perfect segue to get to what I really want to talk about, which is the documentary that you were the subject of. And so for those of you who don't know, there is this documentary that hopefully sells soon, is out in the world so that you can see it, but it's called The Last Republican. It's directed by Steve Pink, and it follows you during your last 14 months in office when you're on the January 6th committee. And I had just seen the trailer, and that's what motivated me to reach out to you because in that trailer, it was very moving. And you said, let me find it, oaths matter. Character matters, truth matters. If we do not renew our faith and commitment to these principles, this great experiment of ours, our shining beacon on a hill, will not endure. It really made me emotional just hearing you say that at the hearings, but then just thinking about the fact that thank God we have people in the government who believe that and push for that and fight for that. But what do you think about that? Because it feels like we're getting very far from that now.
It does. I mean, and I think the thing that worries me as much as anything is, so look, if you look back at, for instance, the Republican Party 10 years ago, Trump's been in our life 10 years. And then you look, even in 2020, there were, I will call them Republicans of the resistance, right? People that were willing to at least go against kind of whatever the party is saying that day. And that's what I love is that independent spirit. But they did that because, when you join Congress, when you join the military, you take the oath to defend and protect the Constitution. And that should mean something, right? And the job of a U.S. congressman, for instance, I represented 700,000 people. So I think about that Soldier Field. I'm a Bears fan. So you take Soldier Field, and it's I think it seats 50,000. So it's 14 Soldier Fields or whatever the math is. And they literally just reach in and pick one person out of that. And that's me. And so you look at that and you go, I have a real not just honor to do this job, but a solemn responsibility. And the problem is when you go to Washington, D.C., it becomes a club of 435 people, and you kind of forget, I'm representing 700,000 people back home. And unfortunately, I mean, and you've seen this in people's comments, they now see their job as, frankly, representing the interests of a man instead of their district. And I think it's in a bad place because as a republic, the oath is really the only thing that keeps it together. Like the only thing that actually makes democracy or self-governance survive is this idea that we have a set of rules and we're going to play by them. Those set of rules are like, you get to vote, that vote counts as something. Whoever wins gets to exercise power for a certain amount of time. Yeah. And, when Trump convinces half of the country, frankly, that an election was stolen, you see a breakdown of that. And I think, unfortunately, we're in the middle of this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's so interesting is it didn't happen overnight. He's slowly been chipping away at it over the last decade so that it's been a very gradual thing that's happened. So I think it's not a shock to people. It's kind of normalized.
And I think it's even longer than that because now that I have the ability to be out of Congress and kind of look at the forest, I can see how this, and the Republican Party started way before I realized it did, right? It really started in like 1994. And, with Newt Gingrich and kind of politicizing just the job of Congress and running against Washington, D.C. And that then, these news outlets come in and echo that, and it begins to tear apart people's like faith in government. You don't want to have people to have blind faith in government, obviously, but like you want them to trust institutions because there are institutions. And just over time, it's like the old, frog in the water. Next thing you know, you don't just dislike government. You don't just mistrust it. You hate it. And next thing you know, you're on the steps of the U.S. Capitol trying to overthrow it. Right. And so that's why I think it's so essential for us. And I don't know how to do this. This is what I struggle with. It's essential for us to as a country, almost take a deep breath, realize where we're at, and really decide, do we want to live like this? Do we want to be in kind of open warfare with each other? Is that what we want our kids to see America as? I have a 3.5-year-old. Do I want to leave him a country that, do I want him to never experience the kind of America I remember? And the answer to that is no. But how do we get there?
Yeah, how do we get there? Well, hopefully you'll solve that problem for us. I'm just kidding. But I am heartened by the fact that people are protesting and demanding that town halls exist, because that's where I feel like it's essential that people listen to their constituents and like what they have to say. Okay, so let's go back to the documentary for a second, because I think and the reason why I want to focus on that so much is because at its core, it's about the core tenet of our political system, which is democracy, which is what we're talking about, and how you fought to preserve our democracy in this like massive moment in time. But what I loved about the documentary is how well they reviewed the timeline of January 6th, and they showed it so well. And I think it's a good reminder for Americans to really take stock of what happened. And it's like January 6th happens. And you say this, it's like the moment that happened, Donald Trump was a non-entity. And I think you used that phrase, right? And you had Mitch McConnell and you had Kevin McCarthy, two of the highest ranking Republicans, come out and actually say that, yes, this is all not true and Trump is responsible for inciting the mob. There's 3 weeks of this kind of silence, not really much happening, and then one moment changed the course of our history. And it's when Kevin McCarthy went to Mar-a-Lago and agreed to meet with Trump. And so my question for you is, what the heck do you think happened in that room that day? I am so perplexed how one moment could change the course of our history.
I know exactly what happened, and this haunts me. This haunts me as well as kind of what we could have done in that intervening 3-week period. But in terms of Kevin McCarthy, look, the guy, and congratulations, Kevin, you were speaker for 8 months. So congratulations, you got the title. But he desperately wanted to be speaker. Since he was a kid, he wanted to be speaker. So he realized when Trump was out, I can either take him on, but I will not get 218 Republican votes to be speaker, because there will be enough Republicans left that hold this against me, right? Because you have to get, again, you don't just have to get a majority of your party, you have to get 218 votes. We saw that when he went into 1,000 rounds of voting.
Right.
And he knew that if he took on Trump, he would not be able to unify the 218 votes in time for that speaker vote, because there will be holdovers left that are hardcore Trumpers that would deny, Kevin McCarthy the speakership over this. So what did he do? He made the decision instead, I'm going to embrace Donald Trump, because the moderates, people like me, they'll just capitulate and come on board. And they did. Mm-hmm. And eventually it's like, in the name of unity, we all need to come on board. And so the day that Kevin McCarthy showed up at Mar-a-Lago shocked all of us, by the way. Every Republican was just like, what? Mm-hmm. Because again, to that point, the assumption was Donald Trump was not only never going to run again, probably going to be in jail and never in the public eye.
Right.
And out of nowhere, that picture pops up, and literally everything turned on a dime. So Kevin McCarthy owns that. The other thing that haunts me is, in that intervening period, the group of us that voted to impeach Donald Trump, we're trying to come up with a way to, in essence, have a filter of who we considered pro-democracy or not. Mm-hmm. And whether you like it or not, and I don't like it, but downtown we call that's the PACs, the corporate PACs that donate. There's probably $400,000 or $500,000 worth of money. And if you remember, a lot of them said we're not giving to any Republican that voted against certification.
Right.
And so we wanted to be the clearinghouse then that said, okay, here's the people you can give money to, and here's who you can't. And make, folks that don't get the money now, and it's kind of cynical, but it's true. Okay, now I support democracy. What do I need to do? And unfortunately, the other people that voted to impeach with me got cold feet. They said it's time for unity. And we lost that opportunity. Look, 30% chance we could have made the difference, but that's better than what we have now. That haunts me almost daily.
Wow. Okay, I guess I just stupidly didn't put that together. Obviously, Kevin McCarthy was looking at this as being the way for him to get more power and a different position in the government.
I mean, look, he didn't he's told me, like, Donald Trump is crazy, right? Now, this is obviously before, because we haven't talked since January 1st of 2020, or 2021, but he's cold and calculated, wanted to be speaker. And like I said, he is now. He got the title.
And
Good job.
Let's not forget, and they call this out in the documentary too, but he rose to the third person, right?
Yeah.
In power of the Republic, right? In like
just
6 years?
a few years, yeah.
Like, he
number
really
3.
was moving and grooving.
It takes a lot of people 15 years to be the number 3rd most powerful person. And most people obviously never are.
Right.
He did it in 6 years. He's a great politician in terms of glad handing and raising money. Awful human being.
Do you think if he watches this documentary in the quiet of his home, do you think he would ever feel remorse for his actions?
It's tough because, and I put this on like anybody that's kind of changed who they are. So it's like, yes, I think someday in the quietness of like his soul, yes. I think if you put him on CIA Truth Juice, right, he'd be like, yeah, I mean, I didn't believe any of it. But humans are able to convince themselves of anything. When you make a moral gamble or a moral compromise, right, you can convince yourself you did it for the right reason. You make enough moral compromises, you can keep convincing yourself. Next thing you know, you're unrecognizable to yourself, but you're totally at peace with where you are because you've made these little decisions. If you'd have told, Kevin McCarthy or anybody, frankly, that's Republican elected congressman now, that someday there will be an insurrection on the Capitol and Donald Trump caused it and he will be reelected. What do you think? And they'd be like, I would stand and oppose that with everything I'm worth because of the Constitution, whatever. And yet they are the ones cheering it. Why? Little tiny things. I mean, I'm not going to go here with the whole, Nazi thing, but it's important just on human behavior perspective, which is 1936 Germany never could have sent the Jews to the concentration camp. 1939 and 40 Germany did. Why? Because they made moral compromises every, so long. And that's how it works.
So then how do we not do that? How do we get back to that? What do we say? Like, how do we make sure? And how were you able to not make those little moral compromises? Like, how did you stay true to that?
For me, it was 2 things. So number 1, I think of like, when I do something, there's going to be historical impact, right? Even if nobody ever remembers me, I don't care about that. But I know that, for instance, my kid's going to read his last name, particularly on January 6th. He's going to read his last name in the history books. And Kinzinger is not very common, right?
Yeah.
How could I ever tell him what it means to do the right thing. If he can read that and be like, well, Dad, didn't you do this? The other thing is, when I ran in 2010, I had just gotten back from Iraq. And I remember thinking, if I'm going to take a vote that's going to send people to war potentially, right? Cause somebody to give their life. How in the world would I not be willing to give my career for the cause of America?
Yeah.
And so, I thought it would be like some tough vote on something, right? Not this, but like if 18, 19, and 20-year-olds die for this country, and it's unfortunate, but we have to have people willing to do it. Mm-hmm. And then I'm in Congress and I'm like, yeah, I know I need to stand up and say this stuff, or I know I need to oppose what happened on January 6th, but listen, I've got a job and I want to keep this job. I have no right to salute a flag draped coffin at that point. And I think that has stuck with me. I said that when I ran for office, and I think it just stuck with me with like, I'm unwilling to compromise like what the country means, what my oath means, when there are so many people that have given their lives for something, literally their entire life.
That's very powerful. Your son's name is Christian, right? Mm-hmm. Christian, you got a good dad here, I'll tell you.
Thanks.
Okay, so then let's go to the actual committee, January 6th committee. Nancy Pelosi announces, I think before she actually talks to you about it on the news, she was like, I'm going to, put Rep. Kinzinger on this. And then she calls you at 5 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, you didn't pick up. And then when you did, everything changed that day. And I think that's a direct quote. You're like, everything changed. Did you know that it was going to change that quickly? And did you anticipate that every or most Republicans were going to turn their backs on you in that moment?
Did I anticipate? I think I anticipated it would change quickly. I don't know. I don't know if you can ever prepare for what you're in for, right? I mean, I became a national figure immediately. That has good and bad sides to it. Your friends obviously all know this, and a good 3/4 of them are like, screw you. But, they obviously weren't real friends anyway. So yeah, I guess I knew it would change, but, I guess the reaction of my fellow Republicans was a little surprising, because I truly thought, and I would have done the same thing regardless, but I truly thought that through this process, there was going to be like an awakening, right? Yeah. I mean, at every step after January 6th, I'm like, well, now they're going to finally wake up.
Right.
No. Okay. Well, after he's indicted, now they're going to wake up. Nope. Well, after he's convicted, now they're going to wake up. And eventually, it's like, well, they're not going to wake up. And so I think I expected that the committee, which I think will have a very important role in history. I think we set the record straight on a lot of things. It's going to be important. I don't know if it's ever going to save the Republican Party. And I think that's what surprised me, is I expected it to do more. Because I expected the people that I worked with, that I had faith in, actually were doing this for the right reason. And they weren't.
Yeah. So what would they do? Like, if you're like walking the halls in the Capitol, would they just look the other way? Did anyone say hi to you? Like, what was the vibe?
I mean, we kept like our kind of jovial whatever back and forth. And, for the first part of the committee, half of them would say to me like, good job. Good job doing it. I can't do it because I'll lose my race in my district. That's what they'll say. Like, I'll lose my primary. I'm like, I'm going to lose my primary too, right?
Yeah.
And so, but they would come up, good job. Or you guys, wow, that's some powerful stuff you had. Or good job, And then later, it's that they started saying that less, because I think, and I never revealed any of the private conversations, but I think they were scared that I would and be like, well, Representative so-and-so said this. Right. And, but no, I mean, the relationships were generally still okay. I still talk to a number of them I don't. And, but it had a real impact, that's for sure. And that's the thing, is you don't realize, because I really believe everybody in their life has an opportunity to stand up kind of against a crowd. And we all like to think that when that time comes, we're going to do it, right? And I think it's much tougher than it seems. But the more you think about it, then when you are actually confronted with it, you're willing to do it. And you end up like, you're kind of in a survival mode. You're kind of in a fight or flee mode. And it's later when the psychological impact hits you. But everybody has an opportunity, I think, at some point in their life, in their career, that they can stand alone and do something. And there will never be a moment you're more proud of than when you do that. I mean, even like votes in Congress, when I was one of like 1 or 3 Republicans that voted for something, those are the votes I was most proud of because it meant I was doing something because I believed in it.
You're right. Well, I remember you saying this in like a PBS interview where you said people are actually less scared of death and more scared of losing their social circle. So how much do you think that played into it? It sounds like
ton.
everything.
I think
right?
it's everything. Yeah.
Their social circle, their constituents, all of that, their job.
Yeah, we're tribal people, right? I mean, one of the reasons COVID affected so many people's mental health is because we were kind of yanked from a tribe. So we try to make our tribe online, which obviously has its own toxic thing. And I think that's part of the reason we have such intense division. But yeah, I mean, so we need that protection. Evolutionarily, that's what we have. And so I think 8 out of 10 adults, if they see a toddler about to get hit by a train, they'd step in front of the train to save the toddler. But man, I don't think that many people would actually be willing to shed their social circle. Maybe most Americans would. The people I worked with in Congress, no. And that was clear. And is that something that we can look at and get depressed about? Yeah. But at the same time, Congress is a representation of us. It's imperfect. We're imperfect people. At no point has America been perfect. We just have to continue to try to take those bad moments and learn from them and get better. And my hope is that someday and I think there will be, I call it like a Saturday morning after a big bender on Friday, you're a little hungover and you're like, what did we do last night? And I think there will be kind of a recognition of the fact that we went too far. And my hope is that the country makes basically a collective decision that we're going to get back to like being honorable in office. That's my hope.
So do you think that bender has lasted for the better part of 10
Wait,
years?
we're on a long bender.
We're on a long
bender. I use the example of like, it's like waking up on Saturday being like, wow, I'm in such pain from the bender.
Okay.
And what we should do is drink water, right?
But
maybe try to go to the gym. Yeah. But a Bloody Mary fixes it like that. So we've been drinking Bloody Marys for a long time.
10 years.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Well, it is especially damning just like when you heard all of the evidence at those hearings. Like it's really difficult to deny the truth that you put forward. All of the videos, you had testimony from Bill Barr. He was like, these claims of election fraud are bullshit. Eric Hirschman, obviously Trump's own White House lawyer. You had the representatives in Arizona and Georgia. You had your star witness, Cassidy Hutchinson. Everybody is saying that it's all not true. Did you fully anticipate that after all of those testimonies, considering that they're coming from the Republican Party and like Trump's own people, that like that it would change? Like, did you think that would be a turning moment?
Yeah, I thought it would, yeah. I mean, look at it this way. People would tell me like, you guys this is a bias hearing or like a partisan hearing. I'm like, you're right, it is. Because we've had only Republicans testifying.
Totally.
Right? And, well, that's not what I meant. I'm like, no, I mean, we've had them. We haven't
But now that
coached
you
them.
mentioned it, you're right. It is partisan.
And
thank you for paying attention to that.
But I thought, I mean, the evidence is compelling. Again, I don't think there's a single person. There's some crazies in Congress now, a little more than when I was there. So maybe some, but most of the people on the CIA truth serum would be like, yeah, of course, Donald Trump caused this. Of course it was Republicans, but there is comfort in numbers.
Yes.
And if all of a sudden Fox News or whoever gives you cover to say, we don't really know who did it, or, the Pelosi witch hunt against Donald Trump or whatever they call it, that gives you safety in numbers. And all of a sudden you find community and you can be ignorant with community because I mean, literally what we're seeing in the GOP, and I'm sorry if it offends somebody, but it's 100% there. This is a cult. And you see that in the behavior. So what happens in a cult? You have to worship the leader, right? You can turn against the leader. You get excommunicated, but the leader is quick to forgive once. So you get excommunicated, but you come crawling back. I mean, look at the Elon Trump thing right now,
oh my God,
right?
that's insane.
You come back, you'll be in the leader's good graces, which is, by the way, a lesson for the left. Be willing to forgive, okay? Build the ranks. But, the lesson is, okay, you can come back, but you never stray again. And so what you end up then is basically a complete vertical chain of obedience. Nobody can go outside of that chain now. And after 10 years of Donald Trump, what we have now is literally nobody in the GOP, with the exception of one or two who may not even run again, show any ounce of independence. And my message, by the way, to the when I said to the left is, first off, this what we're seeing right now, it's not left against right. This is left, center, and sane right against authoritarianism. And I think we have to constantly remember that. But like, I have a friend, she was former MAGA. She's like 80 years old and 75, whatever. I'm sorry if she's watching. I don't know how old she is.
She's 55 years old.
She's 42 years old. And but she calls herself the MAGA grandmother. She was arrested on January 6th at the Capitol.
Oh, wow.
She immediately recognized how wrong that was, mea culpa, and actually campaigned for Harris and proactively rejected the pardon.
Oh, yeah, she was the only one who did.
She was the only one who did.
Yeah, we love you because it's like you messed up and you did something not great, but you owned it, acknowledged it. And,
yep. And that's what we have to be willing to do, because just had an article about the fact that she was disinvited to speak at a rally because some people are unwilling to forgive her for having once supported Donald Trump. I'm sorry. That's not how you build a majority.
No.
So that's an important lesson, I think.
So I guess then this is like the perfect segue to the next part, which is like media and misinformation. So it's like, how responsible do you think the media is for helping to create our current circumstance, right? Because you were talking about conspiracy theories and like cults and stuff like that. Like what used to be fringe is now very much mainstream. So what role do they really play, right? Because all of the hearings, right? You can't deny when you see that it's all fact. It's right there. But if you don't see it because Fox News or another news source doesn't show it to you, and then you only hear the conservative pundits saying that it's not true, what are we left with?
Right. I think they bear a huge responsibility. Well, for instance, when I spoke at the Democratic National Convention, they cut away from my speech to go to the table. And I was like right before Harris. So you'd think they would have been. Well, and they did it with all the Republicans. And, they bear everything on this. And look, I think there's some reality of, let's say Fox News never existed, or kind of like the right-wing ecosystem. We're seeing the democratization of information, which is good and bad, right? And so there would have been more fragmentation. But when you have, because I know these folks, I was steeped in this, from 1990s or the 80s, starting with Rush Limbaugh, right? And then turning into Fox News. And then now you have even Fox News is almost too woke for some people, right? So you have Newsmax and some of the, all the, and so they've created this ecosystem, and it's driven people to anger. It uses fear. This is the biggest thing, is they peddle in fear, right? Be scared of your fellow American, be scared of immigrants, be scared of change, be scared of difference, be scared of gay marriage, be scared of whatever the issue is, you have to fear it because it's different. Because somehow 1955 America was like perfect, even though, by the way, there were a ton of kids that were still sexually abused and women that were sexually abused. It was just hidden, right? And, but they somehow look at that and it's created this like environment. So they believe that this old America is great. They believe they have to fear everything. And what do you end up? You end up with a bunch of scared people that actually think they're really tough. And that's a pretty dangerous mix. So I blame not mainstream media, but I blame like Fox News and groups like that basically refuse to tell people the truth.
Do you think that they're like the Republicans who know better, but are just peddling these things? Right. So it's just then really about ratings and money.
It's
money.
And
that's it.
That's it. Money is the biggest driver of all this. Look at some of the folks you see on Twitter or on social media. They're kind of these provocateurs. What are they doing? They're just engagement farming. It's all about making that money. As long as I get my millions, the country be damned. And unfortunately, that's what we have to fight against.
Well, yeah, and I just was reading that like TikTok and YouTube, like they prioritize the sensationalist news, right? So it's just better to be loud and obnoxious, even if it's not the truth.
Yep. And it's obviously it's cut our attention span significantly. So the ability to sit down and talk about, for instance, if we talk about immigration, I could say, look, we do need to secure the border. I've worked the border. It has real issues, but we don't need to deport 20 million people or however many it is. Let's put them in line to become citizens and product. Well, you've already lost about half of the country because they have a 3-second attention span. So what do? It forces you, and I had to learn to do this. You probably know how to do this, how to get a message out very quickly and powerfully so that people can actually hear it. That's, if you're good at it, it's great because it gives you an opportunity to cut through. But at the same time, people are just consuming too much information and it's breaking them.
Right, but also isn't like bigger topics, like we need more words and more
Yeah.
thoughts to go into it, right? Like it's also nuanced. You can't get an idea across about immigration. It's a complex, nuanced thing, right?
It
Like
is.
there is no 2 or 3 word thing that is going to accurately get across
Yeah.
the significance of it.
And it's like with this is another mindset we need to break out of. Like with every issue, we think there's 2 sides, and there's not. There's 100 sides, right? Gun control, there's 100 positions on gun control,
Right.
100 positions on immigration. We just keep thinking you're either for or against it. No, actually, you may be for some of it in this area. There's 100 different, but we've been convinced that it's just everything's Republican or Democrat, left, right, or yes or no.
Totally. And honestly, I think that's what Donald Trump does so well is he's good at
Yeah.
selling those like 2, 3 word, the nicknames alone. It's a really easy thing to sell.
He's got that, we always call it that lizard brain. Like he knows how to feel people. He knows how to feel the crowd. He's unique in that, which is why I don't think he's replaceable. And and he uses fear so effectively.
Well, what's so interesting about that is, when he had the Trump University, there were things in his manual, and this was in the New Yorker that I reread a couple weeks ago in anticipation of this. But one of the parts of it was don't ask somebody what they think about it, ask somebody how they feel about it. So it is appealing to the emotion,
Yep.
and there's no greater or more intense emotion than fear, right? Because, yeah.
The thing about Donald Trump is he obviously should have been a Hollywood director or something. That's what he always wanted to be.
Yeah, he wanted to do something in Broadway, I think.
Yeah,
He wanted to be
in Broadway.
Producer.
I wish we could go back in time
Yeah.
and give him that.
Yeah.
Right? He probably would have been great at that.
Donald
he knows how
Trump.
to entertain
Yeah.
people. Right? Go entertain people.
Yes.
Just don't lead them, brother.
Right,
Don't
right,
lead them.
Right. Well, I mean, look at him in The Apprentice. That's where he actually made more of his money than real estate. Like that is where he
And it's where he trained Americans to see him as a leader.
Right. Right. Okay, that's so fascinating. Okay. Really quickly want to talk about the backlash that you faced after January 6th committee. It was intense. You had even your family members. There was a whole letter that was published in the New York Times from your family members. It was really sad to read. It was really heartbreaking. Gina, I don't know if you saw it, but it's very sad. Everybody was really on you about it. I can only imagine how stressful that was. What was that like? And does it make you ever regret some of your decisions?
Never
with all
once.
Of this?
The thing I can honestly say is I've never regretted doing it. Because I think, when I see people that have gone through hard circumstances, I'm like, I wonder if they regret, right? I have no regrets. The only regret I have is I didn't do it twice as hard, right?
Wow.
Because I really believe in this. But the impact was significant. And, the way I kind of looked at it, and it was really actually, as you saw in the documentary, as I'm talking about this example, that's actually as I'm coming up with it. And I kind of had an epiphany in that moment. But I realized, like, when you're in the middle of what I was going through, so one day it's literally getting a certified letter to my parents' house. They still do that, from my extended family disowning me, saying I'm part of the devil's army. Donald Trump is really a Christian. And, just insane. And they were the ones that actually sent it to the New York Times. It wasn't us.
Right.
And, and then my co-pilot from the war sent me a text saying he's ashamed to have ever flown with me. This is just
God.
day after day, this kind of stuff. But I use military stuff a lot, but it's like you're kind of in the middle of a war. Nobody has PTSD during a war. It comes after. Because in a war, you're just operating. And that's what I was doing. It was like, okay, well, this person sent it. Screw them. I hate them now. I'm in the trench. I've got this hearing. I've got to prepare for this hearing. And it was when the guns went silent, so to speak, when I got out of Congress and I'm kind of sitting around and taking inventory, that's when it really hit. And it's like, there was a massive cost to it, you know? And
Yeah.
I mean, here's the crazy thing is I've never, now it's going to happen because I'm going to say it. I've never once had anybody confront me in public. The only thing that people say to me publicly are nice things.
That's good.
That is good.
Yeah. We like that.
Yeah. You don't have to change that, guys. But, you know, you just come to realize, like, I don't even know where I was going with that. But, like, yeah, I mean, the bottom line is you realize it took an impact. You realize that you have to work through that. And I was going to say is, you know, when I still go out, there's still part of me that's like, I know 50% of the people out here hate me, right? And you've got to get past that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. But I just really quickly, you do consider yourself a Christian, right?
Yeah.
Like you are a religious person, right? So then when your family said that you were part of the devil's army, how does that make you feel as somebody who is a devout Christian?
Yeah. It made me sad for them, to be honest with you.
Right.
Because
the letter is really
it's awful.
kind
It's
and
awful.
very judgmental and really heartbreaking.
Well, it makes the point in there, Donald Trump is a Christian. And it's like, wait, Donald Trump's the one that said he's never had to ask God for forgiveness. So
Right.
I don't know I don't care what you believe about Christianity, but a basic tenet of it is you have to ask for forgiveness. And so, yeah, I saw that. I mean, it was angering, obviously. It was like disappointing, sickening. But I also was like, when you read that letter, you read brain rot, right? I'm just reading brain rot in people. And it made me kind of sad.
Why are these big churches like so supportive of Donald Trump? Just considering, I mean, you look at I just really feel like if President Biden or President Obama did half the things that Donald Trump did, like
totally.
the church would abandon them in a second.
Yeah.
You know, it's confusing to me.
I'll give you the 50,000-foot overview because we could do a whole podcast on this.
Maybe we'll do another one on that.
Yeah. The Christian church around the world, excluding the American church, does not think of Donald Trump that way. They actually hate him.
Right.
The American church is unique because, again, you feed into this kind of Fox News thing. You know, the church generally was apolitical until the 90s, or really the 80s when you kind of had the Reagan Revolution and the moral majority and all that. And I think the big thing that happened with Donald Trump was a couple things. There are some people that believe in prophecy, and I'm not a prophecy guy, but they somehow connect him to that. And he's a bad guy, but, you know, King David cheated on his wife and killed a man, and God forgave him, right? And it's like, so they use that as comparison. Well, that's okay, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
That's interesting.
But the other thing that changed, I think, on a dime with the Christian church particularly or the evangelicals, was when Justice Scalia died. When he died, and all of a sudden, now you're faced with, because I think a lot of people were like, Donald Trump's this is 2016 now. Donald Trump's such a bad guy. Hillary, we don't like her, but, you know, whatever. And then Scalia dies, and all of a sudden, Trump was very smart to be like, here's the judges I'm going to put up. They're going to guarantee this. And I think that coalesced the church behind him. And it's been unbreakable since. And he is really good at manipulating them.
Yeah.
Because he'll let them pray for him. He'll let them, you know, he'll tell them, I'm chosen by God. You know, he put out the other day a Truth Social where he was on a mission from God, right? He knows he's not, but he plays that game well and feeds into their ignorance.
Wow. It's also crazy. Okay.
It is crazy.
So then how did all of this stuff, this experience, shape your identity as a Republican? Like, where are we going? How do you identify now as a politician?
I still call myself a Republican only because I refuse to let them win right now. I have not voted Republican in 4 years. I voted straight Democrat last 2 election cycles. Wow. So, you know, there will be some news on that front eventually. Because of it, you can't just keep voting for only Democrats and call yourself a Republican. But
also, I would like to say that's a big thing, right? Because a lot of people, even if they're a Republican, will just vote for the Republican because they're a Republican. So I feel like that's a solid thing.
Political identity has become our identity.
Right.
Right? I mean,
yes.
Literally, it used to be, if I was in a neighborhood, when I was a kid, I guess I knew if my neighbors were Democrats because they'd put out a yard sign every now and again, but nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Right. I had friends in college that were Democrats, and I didn't give a rat's ass. And now we date based on it, which dating kind of makes sense because it's like, you know, if you're with a psycho, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, I always say this. I'm not talking about insurrectionists here, but like we should be able to have our differences. If somebody's an insurrectionist, screw them. They don't get to count. But
Right.
yeah. So where have I come? It's interesting. So as I kind of turned against the party, it allowed me to kind of come out of I'm a Republican. You know, I've always been a moderate Republican, but like I'm a Republican. This is what I believe. And I've been allowed to reevaluate a lot of things. And I think looking at it with the benefit of age, the benefit of, okay, I don't have to toe a party line anymore. I see a lot of benefits in what the left was doing that I used to think wasn't. Doesn't mean I'm a lefty now, but it's like, okay, for instance, the voting rights issue, right?
Yeah.
I used to think that the voting rights issue was pretty much taken care of. Everybody can vote if they want to. Now that I'm out, I kind of see like, you know what? There were voter suppression like moves in the South, particularly. And a lot of the stuff they're doing is building into this narrative that an election was stolen. Guns. I moderated much more on guns too as I was in Congress. And, I see like, yeah, we need universal background checks. You shouldn't be able to buy a gun under the age of 21. You can't buy cigarettes under the age of 21.
Yes.
And a whole bunch of other things. And so it's been nice to be able to give me that ability to look and reevaluate some things. And so where do I stand? I don't know. I would call myself right now certainly moderate still. Party affiliation, we'll see.
Stay tuned. But I will
tuned.
say in the documentary, this was like a very funny part. Like every Republican is just a Democrat waiting to find his wing. Like,
Yeah.
he joked that wasn't the case or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean,
Well,
it seems like we could be going that direction. I'm just saying.
Well, but yeah, that's the
tuned.
thing. That's the good thing if the Democrats can do it is like be the big tent party. Be the big tent party. You can have your disagreements in the party.
Yes.
I know it sucks to have a disagreement in the party, but actually that's very healthy.
Yes.
Because we only have 2 frickin' parties in this country. But if you become a party that only allows people to think in this monolithic box, you're never going to win an election again.
Totally.
Right?
But something that I admire just so much about what you were just saying is like we are all allowed to change our mind about things.
Yeah.
And I do feel like people don't really give politicians that ability.
They
It's
don't.
like, but you said this 10 years ago. And it's like, yes, I did. But also in time and with experience and maybe having a kid or witnessing more school shootings, like you see certain things and you're like, yeah, we got to implement different laws and restrictions.
Yep.
Like we should have the permission to change our mind.
We should. And I think it's a sign of maturity to be able to change your mind. I think, the problem is when politicians change their mind, people assume it's for some nefarious reason. And probably it is. I mean, in some cases.
You mean
but
like they just want the vote?
yeah, or like now this is more popular or whatever. I'm running for president if you're the governor of California, and all of a sudden now you're interviewing Steve Bannon. I'm just throwing it out there as an example.
That was an odd choice.
That was a bad choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we have to be willing to make those changes because stuff does change. I mean, look, I went into Congress pretty pro Second Amendment, right? There were a assload of school shootings at the time I was in Congress. If that doesn't affect you, or at least cause you to go, okay, am I really thinking this through correctly? Then you're dumb.
Yes.
And I always said, as Second Amendment defenders, we should have been the ones out there going, well, here's what we need to actually be doing to rein this in. And yeah. So.
Yeah, but I also feel like the messaging with all that is so wrong because I just feel like the Democrats have never said that we want to take
I know
all the guns away from everyone. But I feel like that's always pinned on Democrats where it's like, I would say, yeah, have your gun. But like, do we need machine guns? Like,
Right.
it just feels insane. Like,
Yep.
why? Who needs that other than the military?
And that's been where the NRA, which is kind of non-existent now, by the way, they kind of had a real fall, but that's where their real effect was in the messaging was the whole slippery slope argument, right? Democrats say they want to raise the age to purchase long guns to 21. Well, next, then they want to do something else. Well, by the way, it is natural to say, okay, next we want to do something else, but the slippery slope argument, I think, was invalid, but it does, again, it plays into fear.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
all about fear.
Yeah. It's a very easy way to get what you want.
Yeah.
But
And that's
why
the biggest thing.
Why isn't anyone afraid of losing our democracy, though?
They
like,
are.
Let's instill the fear, right? But I think, too, like, it's such a broad idea. Like, what is democracy?
Yeah,
I bet
know.
a lot of people in the U.S., if you're like, what is your democracy? We so take it for granted, and we don't trust that it really, like, we don't see the fragility of it. But I bet if you ask people on the street, like, what does a democracy mean? I don't think people really know what that means.
I think it's true. And I tell people, like, we always kind of thought it was automatic, right? You just, like, the system's in place, you go vote, stuff happens, right? And it was only in the last few years you realize it's not automatic. And I think what's important is to go back to telling people. It's like why I talk a lot about the importance of America's role in the world, for instance, because people just think like, oh, we're done being involved in the world. Well, no, actually, post-World War II order, America set up to benefit us. Like, we're nice people, but we didn't do this for everybody else. There's these benefits. Well, it's the same with democracy. Like, all of us probably watching, certainly us in the room, we want to be able to choose what we want our family to be able to do. We want to choose where we want to live. We want to choose what our life is going to be. We don't want anybody, we want to have opportunity, right? We may fail at some things, we may succeed at some things. That only happens in self-governance. There's never been autocracy in the world in which the people, the middle class, let's say, was ever better off. Never. So do you believe in middle class? Do you believe in hope? Do you believe in opportunity? This is the only way. Yeah. And I know it's hard, and I know sometimes it's boring to talk about, but this is the only thing that guarantees that you're not going to be in the generation that lets America fail. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. 250 years of American history. Literally next year, I think we're celebrating it. All these generations that have invested so much to this moment, right? My grandpa in World War II, post 9/11 generation, Civil War, you think all of that. Yeah, civil rights to this moment. And what are we asked to do? We're not going to have to go into a trench, right? We're going to have to take to the streets, I think. I think we're going to have to stand strong. We're going to have to stand tall. But that's what we have to do to not be the generation that fails America. And we won't do it.
And you believe that?
I do. I don't think it's automatic.
Right.
And there are days, I mean, I'm being honest, there are days I wake up and I'm like, what God's name's happening? One of the most discouraging days recently was the day after Trump spoke in front of the military, and they were cheering and booing. And as a military guy, I'm like, holy shit, that never happens. Yeah.
Right. It's supposed to be nonpartisan. Why is that happening?
And why are the leaders letting it happen?
Right.
And
so why is that?
They're scared. They believe it. I don't know. And that was a discouraging day.
Yeah.
And then I, realized that you think back, Trump won by 1%, didn't win by that much. There's still going to be an election in 2 years. I think the Democrats are going to win the House. It's not automatic, so you'll have checks, and then Trump's going to be done. But we can't be complacent. And I think things like, no King's rallies. I think things like showing up on the streets are important. We don't want violence, but at the same time, civil disobedience in some cases is okay, right? Dr. Martin Luther King did civil disobedience, and we worship that as a very good way of resistance. I worry that now people start to think civil disobedience is violence, and it's not. I had somebody that told me once, they're like, why did America shift so quickly on gay marriage? And the reason was because, people who were gay started coming out, and so you started to realize, like, oh, I know that person. They're cool, they're good, they should have a right to be happy. And that shifted America's attitudes very quickly, right? And I think that's why going out on the street and not just LA, but Boise, Idaho, right? All those, it's important to show that it's, and particularly honestly, as white men who are seen as all Trumpers now, it's important for white men to speak up, especially, and say, no, we're not part of this bro culture that's really beta that they say is alpha, Right. That's a big message to men too.
Oh my gosh, I could not agree more. But that actually just made me think about something else about the documentary that I loved so much that you did receive a lot of backlash about. But when you were addressing the officers, you got emotional in that moment. And it was one of my favorite parts of the documentary. I was so heartened by that moment because how could you look at these men who defended our government employees and our Capitol and not have emotion? Like, that just feels like a normal, response. And so then to see the clips that Steve Pink chose to show in the documentary of different conservative media outlets mocking you and making fun of you, I was like, what is this saying about our society? And
Yeah.
why do white men feel like this is like the cool thing to do?
I know.
It's wild.
It is. And look, and that's why Donald Trump calls me crying Adam because
Right.
of that, right? And yeah, I mean, look, honestly, I wish I wouldn't have done it because it's like, that sucks. But I also think we should be willing to show emotion. That was an emotional day for me because you see these guys out there like talking about how they got beat up. And I'm like, but they held.
Yes.
Like, and that's important to remind them. They actually won.
Yes.
Look, we men have failed men. And the young generation, so I'm going to say those under 25 or so, you know, they were kind of raised in the time when I think we went too far in calling every part of masculinity toxic. And so they felt like they didn't have a place. Masculinity is good, but there's healthy masculinity. Healthy masculinity is like, I'm going to punch up, not punch down. It's not tweeting in all caps. It's defending your family, defending the defenseless, right? That's all healthy masculinity, defending your country. But in the absence of anybody showing that example, real toxic masculinity in the form of Donald Trump or whatever bro podcast you're listening to at the moment comes along. And Andrew Tate says, you got to treat women like trash. That's actually how you are masculine. And the problem is in the absence of any other definition, these young men have been like, yeah, if that's the definition of masculinity, I feel that. And we've destroyed that generation. It's important for men particularly to take that narrative back. That's not on women and it's not on Democrats. It's on men.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's like the patriarchy has failed the men in that
We have,
regard.
yeah.
Because it is so interesting because like this, like a man saying that, like, oh, I have to treat a woman like shit. It's just like, well, good luck finding any woman who wants to like put up with you.
And the problem is then they use that rejection to fuel the anger.
Right.
It's a cycle.
Exactly. It's right. And it's so funny because I do feel like this current White House, there's this idea of toughness. And it just, to me, seems silly and weak and like...
He is actually the weakest man you'll ever meet.
Well, right.
I know this for a fact. He's scared to death of everything. And he covers that up by tweeting in all caps and being loud. He is desperate. He has imposter syndrome. And he's desperate to cover it up. And that's what you see in Donald Trump. And that's what you see, frankly, in the people that surround him, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to change that. Okay, so this leads me to you and your future. Are you going to run for president?
That's the question.
It is the question. I know that, you know, it's early in the cycle and we don't like to give too much away, but...
No, the true answer is I don't know.
Okay.
It's not a no. And it's not a yes. So the real answer is, I think in about a year, I can take a look and see where we're at. This to me, and I recognize people don't trust politicians' words, but I mean it. This isn't an ego thing for me. So like, if I would decide to run, it wouldn't be because I've just really want the job. Although I would love to be president, there's no doubt. But like, it's because I would see that I have a message that I think is not being filled. And I think the middle of the country, the center of the country is very unrepresented right now. I don't think they feel either party represents them. And unless somebody comes along and fills that void, there may be a position where I'm like, I'm willing to run. You know, look, I was always a very pro-union guy. I think I've spoken to union groups who are desperate to feel represented again. And so I'll make that decision, I think, in a year or so. I'm not eager to do it, but I also, if I do it, I'll jump in and run hard.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. The middle class really does feel like they're getting left behind.
Yeah, they are.
But it's interesting because I feel like a couple years ago, the Democrats got labeled as like the elite, whatever. But historically, Democrats are the ones who are creating government programs to help middle class and wouldn't want to cut Medicaid and Medicare. So, I mean, would that be part of your message too? Or
yeah, it would be bringing the middle class coalition back together.
Yeah.
You think back to the Bill Clinton without the intern, Bill Clinton, his coalition of like kind of working class, right? When you think about that. I mean, really Obama and Biden too. But I think Democrats by the numbers, they have lost that significantly. I mean, the middle class, the working class is now voting solidly Republican. And that was unthinkable 10 years ago.
Totally.
And we're in a massive political realignment. Why is that? I can tell you, I think vast majority reason is cultural issues. And it's really not economics. I think it's effective to talk about like the cuts to Medicaid, for instance, but I don't think that's going to be compelling. Really? I think a lot of them just feel from a cultural perspective that the coasts are talking down to them. And what is it that somebody used an example once? They said, like, people feel like the Republicans are talking to them and Democrats are talking at them.
Oh,
and that's something that Democrats have got to get away from and kind of be once again, I mean, hey, we are you. Let's do this together, right? And that's going to take some time for the Democrats to get that back because it took time to lose it. But that needs to be the focus, I think.
Well, something that's interesting about you is that you are doing all of these interviews and talking to different people, and like you're out there a lot, you know? And I think something that's good is like people are seeing the consistency of you as a person. Like you're not in government now, so you don't really have to do any of this right
yeah.
now, right?
That's true.
So I think it is like a character. It shows who you are and your character. And I think interestingly, it's like when I look at President Biden and I look at President Obama, something that I admired the most about them when I look back, yes, it's their policies, but like you looked at them and you trusted them and you felt like they were men of integrity who were like good to their families and just like a good person. Like if push comes to shove, they would do the right thing. I believe that even if you didn't love their policies. And I feel like that was something when I saw the documentary that I was so drawn to with you, which is why I got so emotional and reached out to you. I was like, oh, even though we're technically different parties currently, who knows? I was like, I would vote for you because I really feel like you really genuinely care about this country and you're like a man of integrity.
Thank you.
And that is what we need.
That's very nice. Thank you. And it is what we need. And that's going to be my goal for the next couple of years is making sure that I'm going to help elect people of integrity. I don't care what they are. Put your country over your party.
Yes.
Put your country, do the right thing. That's it.
I think that's a perfect way to end it. Oh, really fast. There was this thing. This is the perfect way to end it.
All right.
You talked about in your heart that there's a constant fight daily between lightness and darkness.
Yeah.
Right? Like internal struggles. I think we see it. Do you think that there's lightness ahead, or do you think that the soul of this country is currently a little dark and we're fighting?
I do
for the
think
light?
there's light ahead because all I do is look at history, and it's like we have been in these moments before where it feels hopeless and something comes along, not necessarily like a war, but some movement or recognition. The pendulum always swings. So looking at that as a model, I'm like, I think there's light ahead. Doesn't mean I'm seeing glimpses of it yet, right? I guess I do because I see, again, we're only in June-ish and I'm seeing people on the streets already. That's a good thing. That's early. But it's going to take a lot of work. And that's the thing. It starts with each of us. We can have an interest in what's going on in the world, but it's a fight between light and darkness, and we have to let that light win out. And when somebody comes along and they speak the dark parts of your heart like Donald Trump does, it's easy to let that overtake you. And that's what we have to guard against.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was
this
great.
This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
That was amazing. I was
Yeah.
like, I need to look at my notes.